Coming up today on The Story.
I really asked God. I said, look, I really like him, but it's kind of not what I wanted. and I got a message from God, and he said, it wasn't a voice, but I just had this inner knowing, he's the one. He's the one. And so I just said, okay, your choice, God, he's the one.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, today is part 3 of our series paying tribute to the founder of the Shed Happens Men's Ministry, Ian Watson, better known as simply Watto. Today we'll hear from his wife Margaret, who was married to Ian for over 50 years, and they had quite a journey together. Sadly, Ian died in 2019 after a long battle with prostate cancer. Margaret will share their story as a couple with us, and she'll reflect on the amazing impact Watto had on men all over Australia. She's chatting with Eric Scatterbo.
Margaret Watson, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Eric.
Glad to have you with us, and you're joining us from the northern side of Brisbane, is that right?
That's right, from Redcliffe.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sad to hear about the death of your husband. He had an impact on so many men, including myself. He spoke at my church and at some men's camps that he was the featured speaker. So, yeah, he had an amazing impact, and I am so grateful for the way he shared so deeply and sincerely about some of the challenges that we as men go through. But let's talk today about your story as a couple. You were married over 50 years, is that right?
Yeah, we were married 53 years. We got married on Christmas Eve in 1966 when Ian was in the National Service.
Okay, going way back. But we want to go back even further and find out, how did the two of you meet?
Well, we met at a church social. It was a Hawaiian evening, and it was just at the local church hall with high school kids, and he was dancing. I often tell this story. He was dancing with 3 girls, which is typical. And then he just happened to look over and see me sitting there, and he just left the other 3 and came and said, would you like a dance? And so I thought, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was when we met. And then he wanted to walk me home because we lived close by in the next street to each other. But one of my friend's mums said, no, I told your mother I'd be looking after you, and she was going to drive me home. So she drove both of us home. So that was the first night. And then we met a few months later when Ian started work, and we both went into Brisbane by train to work. And so we met at the railway station.
And how did you feel about him? I think he said that it was like love at first sight. But how did you feel?
Well, actually, I couldn't believe how much he talked to start with.
That sounds like Ian.
He just told me so much about himself, and I was, listened, and I thought, wow, I was very impressed with that. But his personality was just so bubbly and so full of life, and that was just overpowering at times.
But you didn't want to date him at first, is that right?
Well, look, I was only just 15, and I had things that I wanted to do, and I was wanting to be a nurse, and yeah, I said, look, I don't really want a boyfriend yet, but he persisted.
He won you over.
He did, yeah.
And where were you at spiritually at that time?
Well, I was a very, very good Christian girl, very devoted. I was a Sunday school teacher, and then a couple of years later I became the church musician. So I'd been a regular churchgoer for years. I had a Christian mum and Christian grandparents, but not my dad. He acknowledged that God was there, but he didn't join mum because he was of a different religion, and in those days you didn't go to a different church, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Mum took the lead spiritually.
And did you have a certain standard as far as who you wanted to marry, as far as their faith?
Well, I actually wanted somebody with blonde hair. That was the first thing.
I'm talking about faith here.
And I did want someone who would come to church with me.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be like Mum.
Yeah, where your mother had to go by herself.
Yeah, that's right. And that bothered me. So I thought, I don't want to go on my own. I want a husband to come with me.
Did Ian go to church at that time?
Well, actually, I really asked God. about that. I said, look, I really like him, but it's kind of not what I wanted. And I got a message from God, and he said, it wasn't a voice, but I just had this inner knowing, he's the one.
Oh.
He's the one.
Wow.
And so I just said, okay, your choice, God, he's the one. So we did go together to the Billy Graham crusade when Billy Graham was here in Brisbane at the Brisbane Exhibition Grounds, and we both went forward and with all the crowds of people and gave our lives to Christ. So probably the Billy Graham crusade experience was probably, that's what lit our together faith, I'd say.
Now let's fast forward several years when you had a deep encounter with the Holy Spirit. How did that impact your relationship?
Yes. Well, my first big change was when I really understood what Jesus' crucifixion meant for me personally.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just wanted to know more and wanted to grow more. And then subsequent to that, I had an experience with the Holy Spirit and the power of the Holy Spirit, and how came to realise that the Spirit lives within me, like a fire come up and come out of me like a living water.
Yeah.
And when I understood that and when I prayed for that, I just changed and I felt a lot more confident.
Yeah.
I have a much closer relationship with God, and without even knowing what was happening, Ian saw something in me that changed. He just saw something, my heart had changed. Where before I was a really good, a good Christian girl.
Yeah.
But he said, I changed into someone whose faith was alive. And there was so much more love coming out of me. And it was only the Holy Spirit in me. I didn't do anything different. It was all the Holy Spirit in me. And that touched Ian.
Yeah. So before that, correct me if I'm wrong, but initially your being on fire for the Lord kind of drove a wedge between the two of you. Is that right?
Well, that was because I used to go off to women's camps, women's conventions and women's conferences. I'd come home and I'd be just like on the mountaintop.
Yeah.
And I was too over the top. Got a bit carried away.
Okay.
As does happen when you go to conferences.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You just come home so filled up.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I might have just been scared Ian a bit. It was a bit too much, yeah.
And where was he at in his faith at that point?
Well, he was having a lot of struggles. He was involved in a few things that were taking him away from God. He was very involved in sport, involved in horse racing, and he was in this real man's world, which didn't encourage him in any way in his faith.
Yeah.
So we were going in different directions. That was the problem. That was the clash.
And I guess one could say that you wooed him twice. In that initially when you were 15 years old, he wanted to be your boyfriend. And then also years later, you kind of wooed him to the Lord in a sense. Well, with the Holy Spirit's help.
Yes, well, he got to a point of being very, very unhappy because we weren't together in our relationship. We were too far apart.
Yeah.
And he was so frustrated, he just called out to God, and he told God he was jealous, that I loved God more than I loved Ian. So he got very jealous and told God that and said, what are you going to do about it, kind of thing. Got really honest with God and said he didn't know what to do. And so things changed for Ian then. We had a new pastor in our congregation who Ian could relate to. And he actually mentored him.
Oh, okay.
It was a little bit like Ian was a bit of a wild horse in the paddock, just, racing around not knowing where he was going.
Yeah.
And we had this pastor who just loved him so much. He loved him into the kingdom more and more and mentored him, which is what he needed. Ian needed men.
Yeah.
He needed men around him, and this is what happened. That this man made a big difference.
And so you were on fire for the Lord, and he caught on fire from your fire, in a sense, and then also this pastor helped kindle that fire as well.
Yep. But also the other thing too, there was a time when he said, look, I think, we're not praying together. that bothered me. I wanted us to pray together, but there was still something between us. We weren't close enough. And so a friend of mine prayed for us, and she said, is there anything that any grudges or any unforgiveness that you're holding against each other? And so we went before God and said, look, whatever it is, we forgive each other. We want to be cleansed of all that, and we want to start afresh. And that did it. That just had to be broken and forgive each other and get on with life. Yeah.
You're listening to The Story. Today we're continuing our series paying tribute to the late Ian Watson, founder of the Shed Happens Men's Ministry. As we're hearing, his wife Margaret is sharing with us their story as a couple, along with insights into Watto's life journey. We'll have more when we return.
The Story.